My life felt like something straight out of a fairy tale. One of those dreams so beautiful that you're afraid to wake up, because waking up would mean losing everything. I truly believed I was living the beginning of my forever. I was about to marry Julian, the man I had imagined for years as the father of my future children, the man I believed would protect me, choose me, and love me even on my worst days. My partner, my home, my safest place in the world. Every detail of the wedding had been prepared with care, almost obsessively. The flowers were exactly the shade of white I had always loved. The menu was carefully chosen to reflect both our families. The music carried memories only Julian and I understood. Even the smallest details, the ones no one would ever notice, felt meaningful to me. As I stood in front of the mirror in my white gown, my mother behind me with tears streaming down her face, I felt complete. "This is it," I whispered to myself. "I found real happiness." What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this wedding wasn't the end of a love story. It was the beginning of the greatest tragedy of my life. From the very start, there was one thing I was absolutely certain of. I could not walk down the aisle without Laura Jenkins by my side. Laura wasn't just my best friend, she was my chosen family, my soul sister, the keeper of my secrets, the only person who knew every scar, every fear, every dream I had ever carried. We had grown up together, we had survived heartbreaks together. We had promised more times than I could count that nothing would ever come between us. So choosing her as my maid of honor didn't require a second thought. No one questioned it, no one doubted it. Everyone knew how inseparable we were. Laura smiled as she helped me adjust my veil, her hands gentle, her voice soft. She looked at me with what seemed like genuine affection, telling me how beautiful I looked, how lucky Julian was. Her eyes shimmered warmly. What I didn't know was that behind that sweetness, behind that familiar smile, a dark secret was quietly waiting, a secret that would destroy my life from the inside out. Julian and I had always wanted a wedding that felt intimate, far from the noise of the city, far from distractions. That's why we chose an elegant estate nestled in the hills of Virginia. The place was breathtaking, a grand stone manor surrounded by century-old trees, gardens in full bloom, wide windows that bathed every room in golden sunlight. It felt timeless, almost sacred. Standing there, surrounded by nature and silence, we imagined ourselves starting a new chapter, a life built on love, trust, and shared dreams. Nothing felt wrong, nothing felt out of place. But that same place, so beautiful, so peaceful, would soon witness the most painful collapse of my existence. We had rented the entire estate for the weekend. Our parents, close relatives, and the wedding party stayed the night before and after the ceremony. We didn't want it to feel like just a wedding. We wanted it to feel like a shared experience, a celebration of love, family, and unity. The night before the wedding, we all gathered on the patio. Soft string lights illuminated the space. Gentle music played in the background. Wine glasses clinked as laughter filled the air. Julian seemed relaxed, even affectionate. He held my hand, kissed my forehead, smiled easily. Laura stayed close to me the entire evening, just as she always had. No one suspected anything. No one could have imagined that beneath that calm, beneath those smiles, a storm was quietly forming, one powerful enough to destroy everything we believed in. That night, I went to bed with my heart overflowing with hope. I replayed the day over and over in my mind, imagining the moment I would walk down the aisle. I felt nervous, yes, but happy, deeply happy. I fell asleep convinced that I was about to step into the best chapter of my life. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I woke up filled with an energy I hadn't felt since I was a child on Christmas morning. Laura was the first person to enter my room. She brought breakfast on a small tray and greeted me with a wide smile. one I now remember as a perfect mask. "You're getting married today," she said softly. I felt safe, loved, supported. I couldn't have known that nothing was real anymore. When it was time, my father took my arm. We walked toward the garden where everyone was waiting. The sound of string instruments floated through the air. White petals lined the path. Faces filled with tears and smiles turned toward me. It felt unreal, like stepping into a painting. Julian stood at the end of the aisle. His eyes glistened. His smile was the same one that had made me fall in love with him over and over again. I walked toward him, holding back tears, convinced that I was making the most beautiful and important decision of my life. No one could have imagined that my "I do" was actually the first step toward my greatest heartbreak. When the officiant asked if I accepted Julian as my husband, I didn't hesitate. "I do," I said, my voice trembling but firm. My eyes were full of love as I looked at him. Julian said "I do" as well, but for just a split second, something in his expression changed. His smile faltered, almost imperceptibly. I told myself it was nothing. Nerves, fear of commitment, normal wedding anxiety. We kissed to thunderous applause. White flowers, tears, joy. In that moment, I believed everything was real. The celebration unfolded exactly as we had planned. Elegant, intimate, joyful. We ate under a sky full of stars. Candles flickered on every table. Guests laughed, shared stories, hugged one another. From the outside, it looked perfect. Julian spoke with guests and smiled, but something in his eyes felt distant. I noticed it, but I chose to ignore it. I didn't want to ruin the moment by overthinking. My father stood up to give a toast. His voice trembled as he spoke about watching me grow, about how proud he was, about the love he believed Julian and I shared. Everyone applauded. Julian raised his glass. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I searched his face for the spark I knew so well. I didn't find it. Still, I told myself I was being too sensitive, but deep inside, something had already begun to crack. After the last guests said their goodbyes and the laughter slowly faded, Julian and I walked upstairs to the bridal suite. The room was exactly how I had imagined it. Warm lighting, fresh flowers filling the air with a sweet scent, candles glowing softly on every surface. It meant to be unforgettable, our first night as husband and wife. My heart was pounding as I closed the door behind me, carefully, almost reverently. I wanted to savor the moment. I believed we were about to seal our love, to step fully into the life we had promised each other. Julian removed his watch and placed it on the nightstand. He slipped off his shoes. He sighed, deeply. I walked toward him, smiling, ready to embrace him, ready to feel close to him after such a long, emotional day. That's when he spoke. "I'm tired." His voice was flat, empty, detached. He didn't look at me. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. I waited for a word, a laugh, anything that would tell me this was a joke, but his face remained cold, distant, almost irritated. He turned away from me, unbuttoned his shirt without a word, and walked toward the small twin bed placed in the corner of the room. He didn't say goodnight, he didn't explain, he didn't look back. He turned off the light. Silence filled the room, a silence so heavy it hurt more than any scream ever could. I stood there frozen, on my wedding night, in my wedding gown, feeling invisible. I sat down slowly on the edge of the marriage bed, my mind racing, my chest tight. I didn't know what to do with my body or my thoughts. I waited. Minutes passed, then more minutes. I waited for a word, a touch, an explanation. Nothing came. All I could hear was the soft sound of his breathing from the other side of the room. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me. I closed my eyes. I stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A TV, a movie, someone coughing, anything. But deep down, I already knew. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. That's when I remembered. The room at the end of the hallway belonged to Julian's mother. Earlier that evening, she had said she wasn't feeling well and needed to go into town to buy some medicine. She hadn't returned. No one had questioned it. My heart pounded harder. Why would Julian be in his mother's room, especially on our wedding night? My mind rejected the thought, but my body kept moving. The groans continued, quieter now, as if someone was trying not to be heard. A cold sweat ran down my back as I walked toward the door, forcing myself to step lightly, terrified of alerting whoever was inside. It wasn't just the sound anymore. It was the absence. Julian wasn't with me. He wasn't in our room. And suddenly, details I had ignored began to resurface. Looks, pauses, moments that hadn't seemed important before. I didn't want to connect them. I didn't want to know. But my feet stopped right in front of the door. My mother-in-law's door, the one that was supposed to be empty. My hands shook violently. The sounds continued. I leaned forward, resting my ear against the wood, holding my breath. A soft creak of the bed, a muffled sigh. Then, a woman's voice. I closed my eyes, praying, begging, please let me be wrong. But I recognized it instantly. Laura. There was no doubt. Her voice, broken, breathless, familiar, mixed with quiet laughter I had heard 1,000 times in confidence. My chest felt like it had been struck by something heavy and merciless. I leaned against the wall, dizzy, barely able to stay standing. Everything we had shared flooded my mind. The secrets, the promises, the years of loyalty, all of it shattered in seconds. Then I heard his voice, Julian, low, unmistakable, whispering Laura's name between breaths. The air left my lungs. The ground disappeared beneath me. This was my husband, the man who had promised me forever just hours earlier, and now he was sharing the bed he refused to share with me, with my best friend. Tears streamed down my face, but no sound escaped my lips. I pressed my forehead against the wall, shaking. Every whisper, every sound felt like a blade cutting deeper into my soul. Still, I didn't move. I stayed there, waiting. I needed to see them. I needed to face the truth with my own eyes. Time lost all meaning. Minutes felt like hours. Then, suddenly, the door opened. Julian stepped out, his shirt unbuttoned, his belt crooked, his hair disheveled. He froze when he saw me standing there. Guilt was written all over his face. He didn't say a word. He just turned his head slightly, as if searching for an explanation that didn't exist. Then, Laura appeared behind him. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared, her dress wrinkled, her heels dangling from her hand. She stopped in her tracks when she saw me, like she had seen a ghost. I didn't need any more proof. Their silence screamed the truth. Still, my voice broke as I asked them why. I stood there, unmoving. My body blocked the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might tear itself apart. Julian and Laura remained frozen in front of me, guilt clinging to them like a shadow they couldn't escape. The silence between us was unbearable. I finally found my voice. "How could you do this?" I asked, my words trembling under the weight of disbelief and pain. "How could you betray me on my wedding night?" Neither of them answered at first. Julian couldn't meet my eyes. His gaze darted around the hallway, as if he were looking for a way out that didn't exist. Laura stared at the floor. I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. "I trusted you," I said, my voice cracking. "Both of you. You were the two people I loved most in this world." Still nothing. Then Julian spoke. His voice was sharp, defensive, almost angry. "You're wrong," he said quickly. "Nothing happened." I laughed, but it came out broken,
almost hysterical. "Nothing happened?" I repeated. He nodded too fast, scrambling for words. "I was just helping Laura. My mother left some things in the room. She asked me to help her collect them." The lie was clumsy, painfully obvious. It hurt more than the betrayal itself. Laura remained silent, her head bowed, her hands trembling slightly. Julian kept talking, piling excuse after excuse, each one weaker than the last. "You're imagining things," he added. "You're overreacting." I felt something inside me snap. I had heard everything, every whisper, every sound they never should have shared. I told him that. I told him I didn't need his lies. I told him his silence and her shame had already said more than words ever could. Julian's shoulders dropped. He closed his eyes, and finally he admitted it. His voice was low, defeated. "I've been confused for a while," he said. That was it. No apology, no explanation, no remorse, just confusion, as if that could justify destroying me. Laura began to cry, loudly. She covered her face with her hands, repeating the same words again and again. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know how this happened." Her tears didn't move me. They came too late. For years, she had been my safest place, the person I trusted more than anyone else, and she had stabbed me in the back in the cruelest way imaginable. I felt numb, completely empty. I realized then that the pain wasn't just about Julian's betrayal. It was about losing two people in one night, my husband and my best friend. I stepped aside. "Leave," I said quietly. Neither of them moved at first. I said leave. Julian looked at me as if he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He walked past me without another word. Laura hesitated. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I love you," she whispered. I didn't respond. Love didn't sound like that anymore. She followed Julian down the hallway, barefoot, carrying her heels, her sobs echoing through the empty house. I stood there until their footsteps disappeared. Then my legs gave out. I don't remember how long I sat on the floor. The walls felt like they were closing in. This was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Instead, it was the night everything ended. I eventually forced myself back into the bridal suite. The bed felt cold, foreign. I curled into myself, still wearing my wedding dress, and cried until my chest ached. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight streamed through the curtains like nothing had happened. Birds sang. The world moved on. But I felt hollow. A knock came on the door. I didn't answer. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Julian. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. The hours that followed were a blur. Whispers filled the house. Looks were exchanged. By the time breakfast was served, everyone knew something was wrong. Julian avoided me. Laura was nowhere to be seen. I didn't explain. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I simply packed my things. When my mother asked what was happening, I looked at her and broke down. She didn't ask questions. She just held me. I left the estate that same day, still married, already alone. I didn't go back to the bridal suite that morning. I didn't change out of my wedding dress right away either. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the lace on my sleeves, trying to understand how a single night had managed to destroy everything I believed in. Just hours earlier, I had been a bride. Now I felt like a stranger in my own life. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was filled with the kind of silence that follows a disaster, when everyone knows something terrible has happened, but no one dares to say it out loud. I eventually packed my bags. Each item I folded felt heavier than the last. The dress, the shoes, the dreams. When I finally walked out of the room, my parents were waiting for me in the hallway. My mother took one look at my face and knew. She didn't ask details. She didn't need them. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Come home." I left the estate without saying goodbye to Julian. I didn't see Laura again. The drive felt endless. I watched the trees pass by through the window, wondering how something so beautiful could now feel so suffocating. By the time we reached home, the shock had worn off, and the pain arrived in full force. The days that followed were some of the darkest of my life. Julian called, he texted, he left voicemails filled with half apologies and empty explanations.